When my parents lost the family estate to foreclosure, they showed up uninvited at my research center. They didn't ask how I was, they asked me to buy it back. The same house they once said wasn't mine to worry about. The same parents who emptied my college fund to send my sister to fashion school in Paris. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I asked them one question. If I were the one losing everything, would you have saved me? They couldn't answer. That's when I knew I didn't have to rescue them. I just had to rescue the child they left behind. Me. It was late afternoon when I saw their car parked at the end of the gravel drive just beyond the iron gate with the sign that read Whitlow Agricultural Innovation Center. My parents hadn't called ahead, they hadn't written. They simply showed up like ghosts from a life I had buried a long time ago. I watched from the upstairs window of my office, holding a cooling cup of coffee in both hands, fingers wrapped tight around the ceramic, like it was the only thing grounding me. They sat in their old gray Lincoln engine off, windows cracked just enough to let the humidity creep in. I could see the silhouette of my father's profile, stiff and angled, his hand tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel. My mother beside him, probably scrolling her phone or folding a tissue between her fingers like she used to do when she was nervous but wouldn't admit it. They hadn't been to Wisteria Creek since the ribbon cutting of the center 5 years ago. That day they'd smiled for the cameras, praised the legacy of Henry Whitlow, and then left before the speeches were over, saying they had to beat the traffic. I hadn't expected them to come back, not after everything. But here they were. I set the cup down and closed the curtain slowly. My heart was racing, but not from fear. Not exactly, more like a warning bell. The kind you get when you know something is about to shift and there's no way to stop it. I glanced at the photo on my desk, the one of me and Grandpa Henry standing in front of the old barn before it became a lab. I was 23 in muddy boots and a borrowed flannel shirt, holding a clipboard like it meant something. He had one hand on my shoulder and the other clutching a worn blueprint. The knock came 10 minutes later. Not loud, not aggressive, just a soft triple tap against the glass of the lobby door. My assistant Jared leaned into my office. "There's a couple downstairs asking for you." "Older." "Said they're your folks." I nodded, already standing. "I'll handle it." He raised an eyebrow. "Want me to stick around? Number, I've got it." "Thanks, Jared." I took the stairs slower than usual, not because I was stalling, but because I needed to remember who I was now. Not the girl who waited at the dinner table while her parents praised her sister's ballet trophies. Not the student who paid her own way through college with night shifts and unpaid internships while her family funneled their wealth into fashion school in Paris. I was the director of a national research facility. I had built something. Not in spite of them, but entirely without them. When I stepped into the lobby, the air conditioning kissed my skin, a sharp contrast to the heat radiating through the glass door. They were standing inside now, stiff and too quiet. "Hi, Mom. Dad." My voice was calm. I was proud of that. "Lauren," my mother said first, her voice papery. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has." My father cleared his throat. "Can we sit?" I motioned toward the small seating area near the plant wall, past the reception desk where a sign proudly displayed our current USDA grant partners. They chose the leather couch like they had a right to comfort here. I remained standing. "What brings you here?" My father opened his mouth, closed, it then tried again. We need your help." I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. Not from them, not with that tone. "The house is gone," my mother said flatly. Her fingers worked at the strap of her purse. "We lost it." "Gone, foreclosed," my father said. Quietly. "The bank took it last week." I let the silence stretch, let them feel it. The weight of that confession. The irony of it. "That house," I said, keeping my voice level, "the one you told me wasn't mine to worry about. The one you said would be passed to the child who carried the family's future. We were trying to give Vanessa the best chance," my mother started. "And you succeeded. You gave her everything." She looked away, shame flickering across her face. "We're not here to argue," my father said. "We're just out of options." "So you came to me, the one who never had options." "Lauren, please." "Why, now?" he hesitated. "Because you're the only one left standing." That at least was true. They needed money. Probably wanted me to dip into the center's funds or leverage some of the properties I held under my nonprofit. They were hoping I'd care enough to save the house that was never mine, never meant for me. The same house where they hung every school photo of Vanessa in ornate frames while mine stayed tucked in a drawer. The house where I was once asked to sleep in the laundry room so Vanessa's out-of-town friend could have the guest bed. I stared at them. You should go. My mother blinked. That's it, there's nothing I can give you, I said. Not now. You're not even going to think about it. I did think about it. For 18 years. Her face tightened. My father looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. They stood. No hugs, no promises to call, no last words. Just silence. When the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Jared passed by again, glancing at me as if to ask if everything was fine. I nodded once, not trusting my voice. Back upstairs, I sat at my desk and turned the photo of Grandpa slightly toward me. They came, I whispered. But I didn't let them in. I closed the file cabinet and sat back in my chair, but my mind had already left the room. It drifted like it always did when something shook loose. Memory has a way of knocking gently before barging in. That day in the spring of 2005 came back clearer than I expected. The smell of lemon cake, the click of champagne flutes, and my mother's voice floating down the hallway as if it belonged to someone else. We were in the living room, crowded with guests, balloons, and a banner that read Bon Voyage Vanessa in gold script. I remember standing off to the side, holding a plastic cup of punch that tasted like watered-down sugar and watching my sister twirl in the center of the room. She looked radiant, dressed in a white sundress, cheeks flushed with praise and possibility. Everyone had something to say to her. You're going to take Paris by storm. Make sure you call us from the Eiffel Tower. Don't forget to send back photos. She laughed, hugged, posed. The girl had been made for attention. Our parents soaked it all in. My father wore his best suit, the one he usually reserved for board meetings. My mother had her pearls on. Everything about that evening screamed celebration. I waited until the crowd thinned and then pulled Dad aside in the kitchen. I had rehearsed the words. Calm, practical, not asking for much. Just some help. I just heard back from South Carolina State. I got in. Agricultural sciences with a focus on sustainable systems. He raised an eyebrow and reached for a soda from the fridge. That's good. Congratulations. There's a payment deadline in 4 weeks. I was hoping maybe I could use some of the savings account Grandpa opened for me. He didn't answer right away. Just looked past me out the window toward the backyard where the party noise carried on. Then he sighed and set the can down. Lauren, we're using that for Vanessa's tuition. The Parsons program isn't cheap, and she got in with limited scholarship. I nodded slowly, the air cooling around my skin. But that account was in my name. Your grandfather set it up under the family trust. We're reallocating for now. She needs the opportunity. You're strong. You'll find a way. I remember staring at the pale green tiles behind him, willing myself not to cry. I already applied for FAFSA. But I'm still short. I just thought maybe, his voice sharpened, not harsh, just final. You're independent, Lauren. Always have been, and that's something to be proud of. Later that night, as Vanessa unwrapped a leather-bound sketchbook from Aunt Lydia and kissed everyone on the cheek, I stayed behind in the hallway, gripping the acceptance letter I hadn't shown anyone. A week after that, I took the morning shift at a coffee shop 2 blocks from campus and started cold calling professors to ask about any open research assistant slots. At night, I scrubbed counters, studied in 30-minute windows, and kept every receipt like I was building a case for a trial no one else was attending. My dorm was a converted maintenance closet at the far end of an old science building. The bed barely fit and the radiator screamed every time the temperature dropped, but it was mine. I taped my class schedule to the wall above the desk and hung a picture of a honeybee colony I'd taken at a community farm back home. No one visited. I didn't invite anyone. What would I say? This is where the daughter they forgot keeps going. Vanessa, meanwhile, sent postcards from Paris. Polaroids with scribbled notes. A photo of a latte with foam art shaped like a swan. A shot of the Seine at sunset. She once wrote in pink ink that she had met someone named Theo who dressed like a runway model and spoke 7 languages. I pinned them to a corkboard by the mirror, not out of longing but out of habit. A way of saying I haven't disappeared. I still exist. I remembered calling home one weekend to ask Mom if I could come back for Thanksgiving. Her voice was bright at first, then hesitant. "Oh, sweetheart, that weekend Vanessa's bringing some friends home. Maybe it's best you stay at school this year, it's just. Things might be a bit chaotic." I lied and said I had a lab rotation anyway. The truth was I ate cold pizza from the faculty lounge and spent the evening organizing plant samples in the biology storage room. No one asked where I was. My advisor, Dr. Lanning, noticed. After winter break, he stopped me in the hallway, his tweed jacket covered in chalk dust. "You're doing 3 jobs, Lauren. And outperforming everyone. When are you going to ask for help?" I didn't know how. Help was something other people were given before they had to ask. Instead, I applied for an external scholarship. I wrote an essay about the way drought patterns affect pollination rates and submitted it with soil samples I had tested on my own. I didn't think I would win, but I did. When the envelope came, I sat on the floor of my dorm for a long time holding it in both hands. I didn't call home, I didn't tell anyone. I just folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the back of my planner. That night, I poured myself a cup of stale dining hall coffee, opened a new notebook, and started sketching designs for a greenhouse that could self-regulate humidity with low-cost sensors. I didn't know it then, but that sketch would become the foundation for the first lab Grandpa Henry helped me build 5 years later. I didn't hate my family, but I stopped trying to belong to them. Somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need to be chosen. I just needed to keep going. I woke up in the driver's seat of my rust-colored Chevy with a crick in my neck and the sun pushing through the windshield like it had something to prove. The parking lot behind the State Greenhouse Center in Columbia was nearly empty, just me and a few delivery trucks. My shift had ended just after midnight, but I hadn't wanted to drive back to my off-campus apartment. The place was too hot and smelled like old carpet. The car at least felt familiar. My phone buzzed. Low battery. I unlocked it and blinked against the brightness. The first thing I saw was an email notification from the Environmental Future Scholars Program. I knew the answer before I opened it. Rejection letters always had the same language. "We regret to inform you. We encourage you to apply again. Due to an overwhelming number of applicants." I skimmed it once, then hit archive. The second thing I saw was a link my roommate had texted me hours ago. "Thought you'd want to see this." I tapped it without thinking. There she was. Vanessa. Centered on the cover of Teen Vogue's spring issue, framed in soft lavender lighting, her long curls perfect, her smile wide but effortless. The headline read "The Next Queen of Couture," and beneath it in smaller text, "From South Carolina roots to Paris runways, how family and faith shaped Vanessa Hayes." I stared at it for a long time. Not in anger. Not even jealousy. Just quiet understanding. I scrolled down the article past the stylized photo shoot featuring vintage dresses and lace gloves to the interview where she thanked Mom and Dad for always believing in her. She said she owed everything to their sacrifices. Their emotional and financial support gave her the wings to chase her dreams. I laughed. It was soft, bitter short. The magazine didn't mention the second daughter. The one who worked nights sterilizing lab trays and analyzing plant cross-pollination rates for class credit. The one who taught herself data modeling because she couldn't afford the advanced seminar. The one who had no family name to drop in recommendation letters. I reread the email from the scholarship board. One of the reviewers had made a note about my application being technically strong but lacking the institutional endorsement and mentorship common among finalists. It wasn't about my proposal. It was about who didn't sign it. I had tried. I had asked Professor Mathis to write something on my behalf, but he had declined kindly but firmly. He said he didn't know me well enough, and besides, those slots often went to students with departmental backing. "You should ask someone in administration," he had said. "Someone who can really push it through." But I didn't have anyone. Not like Vanessa had. When she wanted an internship at a fashion house, Dad called an old fraternity friend whose niece worked in marketing at Marc Jacobs. When she needed to fly to Milan for an industry event, Mom cashed out part of her Roth IRA. I paid for my textbooks by selling plasma twice a week. After class that day, I stopped by the university library and borrowed a used copy of Soil Ecology in a Changing Climate. It was missing 3 chapters and had a torn cover, but I needed it for my senior thesis. I sat by the window on the 3rd floor and tried to read, but the words blurred. I kept seeing Vanessa's cover image, that confident gaze, the caption that read, "Her future's made of silk and certainty." I wondered what mine was made of. That night, I returned to the lab early. I cleaned the beakers, reset the moisture sensors, and organized the seed trays by species and trial group. No one asked me to. No one noticed. But the work gave me shape. In a world where I didn't belong to anyone's plan, it was the only thing that felt like mine. Around midnight, I got a call from Mom. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring out once, twice before pressing accept. "Hi, Lauren," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Did you see it, the magazine?" "Yeah, I saw. Isn't it amazing? She's finally getting the recognition she deserves. All those years of hard work." "That's great, Mom." There was a pause. "You could call her. Tell her you're proud. She's your sister." I swallowed hard. "She's busy. I'm sure she has enough people saying it." More silence. "Anyway, how's school?" "It's fine, just working on my thesis. Got another rejection this morning. For a fellowship." "Oh honey, I'm sorry. Maybe next time." Some of those programs are so political. "You know how it is." "I do," I said. She didn't ask for details. Didn't ask what my thesis was about or what kind of research I was doing. Just said she had to go because the dog needed walking. I ended the call and stared at the blank screen for a while. Then I opened my notebook and started outlining a new section of my thesis. It was messy. Scribbled equations, arrows pointing in every direction, tiny sketches of seed rotations in controlled climates. It wasn't beautiful, no camera would capture it, but it was mine. And no one could take that from me. It was a Sunday morning in late April when I got the call. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was not. Grandpa Henry never used texting. He said if something mattered enough to say, it was worth hearing out loud. His voice crackled a bit through the old landline, but there was a steady warmth in it that made me instantly sit up straighter on my futon. "You free this afternoon, kiddo?" "Yeah, I think so." "Everything all right?" "Course it is. Just figured it's time I showed you something. Come by around 2. Bring that big brain of yours." He hung up before I could ask questions. Typical. I borrowed Amanda's car and drove the hour-and-a-half back to Wisteria Creek, watching as the flat campus roads turned into familiar winding streets flanked by pine and dogwood trees. The further I got from town, the quieter it became. No horns, no construction noise, just the steady hum of tires on country road. When I pulled into the gravel driveway of the Whitlow farm, the screen door was already propped open with a boot. I saw him through the window, hunched over the dining table with blueprints spread out like maps from a hidden expedition. He looked up when I stepped in, eyes bright beneath his old Braves cap. "There she is. The real scholar in the family." I smiled and dropped my bag by the door. "What's all this?" He waved a hand over the papers, then motioned for me to sit. "I've been working on something." Quietly. Figured I'd wait until it was more than just an idea before dragging you into it. He handed me the top page, a hand-drawn layout of what looked like a converted barn. Inside were labeled sections. Soil testing, greenhouse, classroom, outreach office, compost lab. "It's a research center," I said, slowly tracing a finger along the irrigation lines sketched in pencil. "Not just research, education too, hands-on. For kids, for farmers, for anyone the big universities forgot. This land's got more potential than people think. But it needs someone like you to make it real." I looked up, throat suddenly dry. "Me?" He leaned back, chair creaking under the weight of his calm certainty. "Lauren, you've been building things your whole life. You just didn't have the space to plant them. I figured it's time someone gave you that space." He stood and walked to the old china cabinet, pulling out a yellow folder. Inside were legal documents, grant templates, nonprofit formation guides, land transfer agreements. I started all this 5 years ago. Kept it quiet so no one could talk me out of it. The land behind the West Fields. It's yours. In full, no liens. No strings. I stared at the papers, unable to speak. He reached over and placed a folded letter on top. The envelope had my name in his blocky handwriting, the kind I used to copy when I was little because it looked so sure of itself. You don't have to open it now. But read it when you need reminding. Tears burned behind my eyes before I even felt them fall. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you're the one who never asked to be chosen. You just did the work anyway. That matters more than you know. I wiped my cheeks with the sleeve of my hoodie, embarrassed by the emotion that poured out of me all at once. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, just think. When you're ready, you'll know what to do with it. We spent the next 2 hours walking the fields behind the barn. He showed me where he wanted the solar panels to go, the rainwater tanks, the compost trench. He talked about soil memory, about the way Earth remembers how it's been treated, about how he believed kindness could be taught through planting and harvest cycles. He never mentioned Vanessa. Not once. Not in contrast. Not in bitterness. That was the gift. The freedom of being seen without being compared. As the sun dipped behind the tree line, casting gold across the corn rows, I realized it had been the longest conversation we'd had in years. And the most important. I left the folder on the passenger seat the whole ride home, glancing at it at every stoplight like it might disappear if I blinked too long. The letter I didn't open right away. I kept it tucked in the back of my notebook, unread but ever present. Like a lighthouse beam just below the horizon. A few weeks later he fell. Nothing dramatic. Just a slip on the porch steps while changing a light bulb. But the complications piled on quickly. Hospital visits turned into hospice. And then one morning in early August the phone rang at 5:30. My mother's voice was thin and quick. Your grandfather passed in his sleep last night. It was peaceful. She didn't ask if I needed a ride. She didn't ask if I was okay. The funeral was small. Vanessa spoke. So did a pastor who mispronounced our last name twice. I didn't speak. I didn't cry either. Not there. I waited until I was back in my dorm room, sitting cross-legged on the floor. The letter finally opened in my lap, his handwriting steady and unmistakable. You already know what you're capable of, kiddo. I just hope this place gives you permission to prove it to yourself. I read it twice. Then I got up, opened a new document on my laptop, and typed the words Whitlow Agricultural Innovation Center, Founding Charter. That night I didn't sleep. I drafted, sketched, outlined. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because for the first time in a long time someone had said yes. The first raised bed was nothing more than a plywood box filled with borrowed soil and hand-me-down seeds, but the kids gathered around it like it held magic. That was in the spring of 2020, the same week the headlines started. I was standing in the shade of an old oak tree at the back of the community garden watching a fourth grader named Tay proudly push a trowel into the dirt when Jared walked up from the annex, holding his phone out like it was smoking. You're gonna want to see this, he said. I took the phone and squinted at the screen. It was a news article. Elliot Mason investigates the fall of a fashion darling. Vanessa's face stared back at me, half-lit mascara, perfect, the same pose I'd seen 100 times before on magazines. But the title underneath it felt sharp enough to cut glass. Fraud. Embezzlement. Breach of fiduciary duty. The article laid it out in devastating detail. Investors in her lifestyle brand V&H Studio were suing. A whistleblower inside the company had leaked financial records showing she used investor funds to pay off her credit card debt, rent a loft in Tribeca, and cover a luxury trip to Morocco with her boyfriend, who, according to the piece, had since gone bankrupt after fronting capital on her word alone. I handed Jared the phone without a word. She's trending everywhere, he said. Brands are dropping her like she's radioactive. I nodded. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't breaking either. If anything, it was oddly quiet. You okay? I looked over at the kids kneeling in the dirt laughing about a worm they found. Yeah, I said. Just surprised it took this long. That night, more stories followed. Old collaborators came forward. So did former assistants. Screenshots. Voice memos, receipts. Vanessa, it turned out, had built her empire on charm and connections and the assumption that no one would dare question her. Until someone do. The next day, a local reporter called the center asking if I'd like to comment. I declined. Instead, I spent the morning with a group of fifth graders learning to prune tomato vines. One of them, a boy named Marcus, tugged at my sleeve while holding a pair of safety scissors. "Miss Lauren, do you have a sister?" I paused, then took the scissors from his hand and showed him how to snip just above the node. "I do," I said. "But I work with kids now, not grown-ups." He seemed satisfied with that answer. Later, I sat on the edge of the teaching garden and watched the breeze move through the rows of kale and beans and sunflowers the kids had planted from seed. Behind me, the lab was quiet. Most of the research team had taken the day to finish data logs at home. I scrolled through my phone not to read the articles, but to see the photos. All of them still so polished. Even in disgrace, Vanessa looked like a curated tragedy. The public fed on her downfall like it was dessert. But I knew better. This wasn't sudden. This was the end of a long, expensive lie finally unraveling. I remembered once when I was 13, Vanessa had taken $50 out of Mom's wallet and blamed it on me. She cried, threw her arms around Dad, and said she would never lie again. They believed her. I got grounded for a week. Years later, I asked her why she did it. She just shrugged and said, "You always bounced back." I suppose I had. I bounced through college on ramen and grants. Bounced through rejection letters and internships no one remembered. Bounced into this life piece by piece without a single safety net. And now, for the first time, Vanessa was falling without one. That thought didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring revenge or relief. It just felt inevitable. Like watching a structure collapse because the foundation was always hollow. That evening, I called Grandma Evelyn. I hadn't told her yet. She picked up on the second ring, voice as crisp as always. "Lauren, sweetheart. Everything all right?" "Yeah, just a lot of noise in the world today." She didn't ask what I meant. She never did. She always knew. "Come by for supper tomorrow," she said. "I made pecan pie." "Okay. And Lauren, I'm proud of you. Just in case I haven't said it enough." My throat tightened. "Thanks, Grandma." After we hung up, I sat in the dark lobby of the annex for a long time, watching the stars press faintly against the skylights. Somewhere out there, people were arguing on Twitter, writing think pieces calculating how fast a reputation could fall. I didn't join in. I went back outside, knelt beside the garden, and watered the beds by hand. Not because I had to, but because someone had to keep things growing. The letter came certified, tucked inside a plain envelope with no return address. Jared brought it into my office with a look I didn't recognize at first. Pity, maybe. Or discomfort. He set it on my desk and said nothing, just nodded once before walking out. I opened it slowly, peeling back the flap like it might bite. Inside was a legal notice from Franklin State Bank. Formal language, cool and polished. The house on Sycamore Lane had officially entered foreclosure. Auction date set. All rights to ownership terminated. I stared at the name. My childhood home. The one with the cracked porch swing and magnolia trees that leaned too far west. The one where my mother used to burn cinnamon sticks on the stove instead of baking, and my father read the newspaper with a pen in hand, correcting typos out loud like he was the editor-in-chief of the world. I hadn't stepped inside that house in over 6 years. Still, the thought of it empty felt strange. Like something had shifted in the earth, and no one had marked the tremor. 2 days later, they came. They didn't call ahead. Just pulled up in a borrowed SUV and sat in the parking lot for half an hour before walking through the glass doors of the annex like customers with a complaint. Jared radioed up. "Your parents are here." I told him to send them in. They looked older, smaller somehow. My mother wore a pastel blouse and sunglasses even indoors. My father looked like someone had taken a vacuum to his pride. But their voices when they spoke still carried that same quiet assumption of authority. "We need your help," my father said, taking a seat without waiting to be offered one. "It's not about us," my mother added quickly. "It's about the house. The family home." The family home, I repeated. She nodded. It's being auctioned. We were late on payments for too long. The legal fees stacked up after everything with Vanessa's case. The taxes. She let the word hang in the air like it explained everything. My father leaned forward. You have the means, Lauren. We know you do. And the property is part of our legacy. Your legacy too. I looked at them for a long time. When I was 17, I asked you if I could use my college fund. You said it had been reallocated for Vanessa's tuition. When I got accepted to South Carolina State, you congratulated me then, reminded me rent wasn't free. When I got my scholarship, you said it was good, I was finally pulling my own weight. They didn't respond. So here's my question, I said. If I were the one facing foreclosure, if I had come to you asking for help to save the only home I'd ever known, would you have done it? The silence stretched. I see, I said quietly. Lauren, my mother tried. That was a different time. You thought I'd be fine no matter what. That I didn't need support. But now that you've lost something, I'm supposed to pretend none of it happened. It's still your childhood home, my father said. The only thing that made it home was Grandpa Henry. And you buried him in the backyard like a footnote. My mother flinched. Please, Lauren. We're not asking for much. Just help us buy some time. We'll pay you back. We just need the deed returned to the family name. I leaned back considering. Then I spoke slowly. All right, I'll consider it. They both perked up, hope flickering across their faces. On one condition. Anything, my mother said. I want you to sit down with Grandma Evelyn. I want you to look her in the eye and apologize for how you treated her after Grandpa passed. For leaving her out of everything, for making her feel like she was just a caretaker and not a person. You cut her out of holidays, told people she wasn't well when she was just grieving. You treated her like an inconvenience. My mother blinked. My father stared at the floor. And I want it public. Not a phone call, not a text. I want you to go to church with her this Sunday and say it in front of the people you lied to. Lauren, my mother said, her voice going sharp at the edges. That's dramatic. Is it? We're not performers, she said. You expected me to be. This is different. No, I said. It's not. My father stood up slow and stiff. We came to you because you're family, because we thought you'd care. I do care, I said. Just not about appearances anymore. They left without shaking my hand, without looking back. My mother's heels clicked across the tile like punctuation marks. My father said nothing as he opened the door for her. I sat in the quiet that followed, listening to the hum of the refrigeration units in the lab below. That night, I visited Grandma Evelyn. She was sitting on the porch shelling peas into a metal bowl like it was still 1965. They came by, I said. She didn't look up. I figured. They want the house back. She nodded. Did you say yes number? I gave them a choice. She paused, then looked at me, the corners of her mouth twitching like she might smile. You're your grandfather's girl, she said. I didn't say anything. We sat in the dusk as the cicadas tuned their chorus, the bowl slowly filling with green. Behind us, the kitchen light spilled through the screen door, catching dust motes midair like stars waiting to be seen. The next morning, I found Grandma Evelyn already in the backyard, her sun hat tilted back and a pitcher of iced tea sweating on the old iron table. She didn't say anything when I stepped out. Just patted the seat beside her under the magnolia tree, the one that had survived hurricanes and droughts and everything in between. I sat down slowly. The branches above us rustled in a rhythm I hadn't heard in years. Not since the summer I was 10 and built my first model garden with Grandpa Henry right here in this very spot. We'd sectioned off rows with popsicle sticks and string-labeled the imaginary vegetables with index cards and dug holes for bean seeds we never expected to grow. I had used a pink spiral notebook to document each fake crop and soil type, and he had watched like I was inventing flight. You know what's funny, I said, letting the breeze move over us. They didn't even ask how I was doing. Just came in asking for the house like they were ordering coffee. Grandma shook her head, smiling without amusement. They've always thought grace was something they were entitled to, not something earned. I turned toward her, studying her face. She'd gotten older in ways that snuck up on me. The skin around her eyes was softer, her hands more delicate, but her spine was still straight, her voice still precise. I told them I'd help if they apologized to you. In public. She looked surprised for only a moment before her mouth pressed into a thin line. And what did they say? They walked out. She nodded slowly, tapping her fingers against the side of her glass. I suppose they thought I was too old to matter anymore. You never stopped mattering, I said. We sat in silence listening to the creak of the porch swaying empty in the distance. After a while, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small cloth pouch. She placed it in my lap without a word. Open it. Inside was a worn pocket watch, brass edges dulled by time, the initials HW etched faintly into the back. I pressed the clasp and it clicked open. Inside the lid was a tiny photo. A girl with wild brown curls and skinned knees holding a notebook close to her chest, grinning from ear to ear next to a wooden bee display. I was 10 in that photo. He carried that with him everywhere, Grandma said quietly. Even when he knew his memory was going, even when he couldn't find his shoes, he never forgot where that watch was. I ran my thumb across the image, my throat thick. I don't want revenge, I whispered. I'm not angry the way I used to be. I just want them to stop defining me like I'm some footnote in Vanessa's story. She reached over and took my hand. You don't owe them an apology for becoming who they refused to see. And you don't need their permission to stop carrying their version of you. I blinked against the sunlight filtering through the magnolia branches. Sometimes I wonder if it's selfish to keep saying no. To draw a line so hard in the sand that even I can't step over it anymore. It's not selfish to protect what you've built, she said. What's selfish is expecting someone else to carry your guilt and call it family. I looked up at the tree, remembering how its blossoms always bloomed too early. How the petals would fall in thick waves before spring even settled. I used to think that was a flaw. Now I saw it differently. Maybe some things are meant to bloom on their own timeline. He knew, didn't he? I asked. About how they treated me. How they left me out of everything. Of course he knew. He just figured you needed space to become someone without their noise. I closed the pocket watch gently and tucked it into the pouch, then into the front pocket of my jeans. What if they come back again? They will, she said. People always return when they realize they've used up every other option. Then what do? You decide if they're coming back for you or for what you have. And then you act accordingly. I thought of the letter Grandpa had written me. The one still folded in my desk drawer at the annex. I thought of the line he'd written near the end. You already know what you're capable of. I just hope this place gives you permission to prove it to yourself. I stood and looked out at the garden we had planted together last fall, the one with wild mint that kept overtaking the rows of beets. I had meant to pull it but never did. Grandma gathered her tea glass and stood beside me. You know, she said, I used to think blood was the strongest bond there was. But that's not true. Choice is stronger. I turned toward her, curious. We don't get to choose who we come from. But we get to choose who gets to stay. Who we build with. Who we carry forward. She reached up and brushed a magnolia petal from my shoulder. You're not carrying them anymore, Lauren. You're carrying yourself. I didn't say anything. Just stood there under the canopy of a tree that had outlived storms and silence and still found a way to bloom. The envelope was thick, certified, and hand-delivered to the front office of the annex. Jared brought it to me with an expression that said he'd already read the first few lines and hated every word. I took it to my office, closed the door, and opened it slowly, careful not to tear anything, even though my hands had started to tremble. They were suing me. My parents and Vanessa had hired legal representation to challenge ownership of the Whitlow Agricultural Innovation Center. Their claim was simple. The land and assets, they argued, were part of the Whitlow family legacy, and therefore subject to division as family inheritance. They cited generational equity, communal property, and a loosely interpreted clause from Grandpa Henry's obituary write-up. They didn't even use my name in the claim. Just referred to me as the current operator of the facility. I sat at my desk for nearly an hour without moving. Then I stood up, walked out the back door, and stood in the middle of the research field, letting the wind pull at my sleeves. I looked at the rows of sprouting lettuce and the solar panels glinting in the sun and reminded myself to breathe. That night, I called Bethany Cross. She was not just a lawyer, she was a force of nature. Short, sharp, and always 2 steps ahead. I had met her during a grant review board 4 years earlier and kept her card in my desk drawer ever since. Just in case. Bethany listened carefully, then asked me to scan everything over by midnight. She called back at 6 the next morning. "We're not just going to win Lauren. We're going to make them wish they'd never brought this to court." For the next 8 weeks, we built a case. Bethany assembled documentation like she was piecing together a cathedral. Grandpa Henry's signed land transfer agreements, the foundation's bylaws, the nonprofit status filings, and most importantly, his handwritten letter to me. She found financial audits, donor records, and early blueprints with my initials scribbled in the margins. But it wasn't just paper that would matter. It was people. Grandma Evelyn didn't hesitate. "You want me to testify?" she asked, pouring coffee like it was a casual request. "Only if you're comfortable." She looked up at me with that steady gaze. "He built that center for you, not for your name. Not for your degree. For your heart. And I'll say that to 100 judges if I have to." Court started the following Monday. The courtroom in Charleston smelled like lemon cleaner and worn fabric. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, stiff and dressed in muted grays. Vanessa wore sunglasses indoors. Her new attorney, a man with perfect teeth and a louder tie than necessary, did most of the talking. They argued that the property had always been considered a family estate. That Grandpa Henry had been ill during the time of the transfer. That my presence at the center was thanks to years of family support, both emotional and financial. Bethany let them speak. Then she stood and dismantled the claim with surgical precision. She introduced the notarized land deed. Presented tax records showing I had been financially independent since I was 19. Displayed the nonprofit's charter bearing my name and signature as sole founder. She even included a time-stamped video of Grandpa Henry recorded by a local news team before his passing, standing in front of the annex and saying, "This is Lauren's dream. I'm just giving her the dirt to build it on." But it was Grandma's testimony that changed everything. She wore her Sunday hat and walked slowly but without help to the witness stand. When she spoke, the room went silent. Henry knew exactly what he was doing. He started planning that center years before he got sick. He built it for Lauren because she was the one who stayed curious. The one who listened to the land. This was never a family project. This was his gift to the one person who saw what he saw. The opposing lawyer tried to cross-examine. Asked her if she had any bias. She laughed. "Of course I have bias. I'm a grandmother, but I also have eyes. And memory. And records of every holiday this family chose to leave Lauren out of." When the judge finally ruled, he didn't even hesitate. The plaintiffs have failed to prove any legal or equitable claim to the Whitlow Agricultural Innovation Center or its associated assets. The defense has demonstrated full independent ownership and operation under state and federal law. Case dismissed. I didn't smile. I didn't exhale. I just gathered my things and walked toward the exit. But halfway through the courthouse doors, I heard him. My father's voice. "You've forgotten who you are," he said, not loud, but clear enough for it to echo in the marble hallway. "You've forgotten your blood." I turned slowly. "No," I said. "I remembered my humanity. I chose it over tradition that only served itself." He didn't respond. Outside, the sky had started to clear. Grandma met me at the bottom of the steps, arms open, steady as always. "Let's go home," she said. We didn't talk about the verdict. We didn't need to. We had built something no court could take. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late June, the kind where the air smelled like wet pavement and honeysuckle, and the rain came without warning. I was reviewing soil reports in the greenhouse when I saw the figure through the glass doors. Alone, motionless, her silhouette slightly blurred by the fogged-up pane. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then she stepped inside. Vanessa. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a loose braid, strands clinging to her cheeks from the drizzle. Her coat was too big, navy blue and threadbare around the sleeves. She held a canvas tote to her chest like a child clutches a backpack on the first day of school. We stood there just looking at each other. I didn't speak first. I had learned by now that silence is often more honest than words. She swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. I'm not here to ask for anything. Not money, not favors. I want to help. If you'll let me. I raised an eyebrow. Help. She nodded quickly. The summer program. The youth camp. I saw the flyer at the co-op downtown. I've been volunteering with kids lately, doing literacy tutoring. I thought maybe I could assist here too. Just basic stuff. I don't expect. I cut her off gently. You want to volunteer? Only if you'll have me. I know it's late in the season and I have no credentials. But I don't want anything from you. I just want to do something that doesn't feel empty. I studied her face. There was no trace of the woman I used to see on billboards, no perfume, no practiced posture. Just exhaustion and something else that looked almost like sincerity. You follow the schedule, I said. You do the training. And we don't talk about the past, not here, not with the kids. Her eyes filled but didn't spill. Deal. We shook hands. I assigned her to presentation skills and storytelling. It was the only area none of our staff wanted to touch. Most were scientists and educators. They could teach compost ratios and photosynthesis, but when it came to helping 10-year-olds explain their projects with confidence, we all fell short. Vanessa surprised us. She showed up early. Wore practical shoes. Helped the kids with posture drills, voice projection, even breathing exercises. She made them laugh without trying. When a shy boy named Isaiah refused to speak above a whisper, Vanessa knelt beside him and whispered back until he giggled and agreed to try again. The kids adored her. They called her Coach V. The staff was skeptical at first, but no one could deny her impact. Attendance was up. Parents stayed longer at pickup just to peek through the glass wall and see what she'd do next. One afternoon, she transformed the rec room into a mini stage with cardboard spotlights and let each child perform their science demo as if auditioning for a Broadway show. Still, she never talked about herself. When the kids asked what she did before this, she would smile, adjust her scarf, and say something vague. Lots of things. Nothing like this. Once during cleanup, I found her sitting on the back steps of the annex staring out at the field. I approached slowly, unsure of what she needed. She didn't look at me, just said softly, I forgot how quiet the world could be when it's not demanding something from you. We sat there for a while. The rain had left tiny puddles between the bricks and the air was damp with the smell of mulch and wet roots. After a few minutes, she stood, brushed the dirt off her jeans, and walked back inside. She never apologized. Not with words. But she showed up every morning. She helped a girl with a speech impediment practice her sentences 15 times until the girl stood in front of the class without stuttering. She brought healthy snacks from the farmer's market when one kid forgot lunch. She stayed late to help design the end-of-camp presentation, carefully organizing poster boards and checking that every child had their names spelled correctly. And she never once brought up what happened before. Not the lawsuit. Not the press. Not the house. Some people change loudly with declarations and apologies and grand gestures. Vanessa changed quietly. She chose work over redemption, consistency over confession. And for the first time in my life, I saw her as something other than a storm I had to brace against. I saw her as a person learning how to begin again. And that was enough. It had been almost 2 months since Vanessa first stepped back into my life, and still I found myself studying her the way I used to study rainfall, quietly, cautiously wondering when the storm might return. That night, the rain had settled into a soft mist clinging to the windows of the annex, like it was afraid to fall too hard. I stayed late to finish curriculum reports and ended up wandering through the greenhouse without meaning to. The grow lights bathed the space in a quiet gold, and in the far corner she was there again. She didn't hear me approach this time. Her back was to me, hunched slightly over a seedling tray, carefully thinning out lettuce starts. She worked with slow, deliberate hands like she was tending something more fragile than roots. I leaned against the doorframe for a moment. You're off the clock, I said softly. She didn't jump. Just glanced back over her shoulder, then returned to her task. The plants don't know what time it is, she said. Besides, I like the quiet. I stepped in, pulled up a stool beside the irrigation shelf, and waited. I didn't want to talk, not exactly. But something in the air felt unsettled, like the silence between us needed to be acknowledged before it soured. She straightened, wiped her hands on her jeans, and finally turned to face me. You ever think about how much we used to fight over nothing? I shrugged. I think you fought. I just stopped talking. That made her smile just barely. Fair enough. She wandered to the workbench, sat on the edge, and looked around. You built something beautiful here. I mean that. I nodded. Vanessa stared up at the rafters, watching the soft sway of the heat lamps. When I was in New York, she began, there was this one rooftop party brand launched something with champagne and silent DJs. Everyone was taking pictures of themselves. Not with each other, just of themselves. I remember standing in the middle of it and feeling like I didn't exist unless I was holding my phone up. I waited, letting her continue. I used to think attention was proof of existence. Like if enough people looked at me, it meant I was real. She paused, looked down at her shoes. But I never felt more invisible than I did in those rooms. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't cry. You though, she said, turning to me. You saw everything. Even when we were kids. You noticed when Mom got quiet in the car. You saw when I was faking confidence. You saw me. That's what made it worse, I said, not harshly, just honest. Because I kept hoping one day you'd look back and really see me too. Vanessa nodded slowly. I know, I see you now. Her eyes met mine, and for a second I thought maybe she would say it. The words. The ones that mattered more than any legal victory or carefully rehearsed compliment, but she didn't. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. Something flickered across her face, regret, maybe, or shame. Then she closed it again and looked away. Instead, she said, You kept the honeybee display. I followed her gaze to the old project, still standing near the back wall, slightly faded edges curled with age. I told Grandpa once I wanted to take it down. He wouldn't let me. Said it was proof that curiosity deserved a place at the table. He was right. Vanessa walked over to the display, running a hand lightly along the cardboard edge. I used to think you were small for not leaving town. That staying meant you were afraid to be bigger. I raised an eyebrow. And now I think I didn't know the difference between spotlight and purpose. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because I knew this wasn't a conversation in the way most people understood it. This was something slower, something earned in pauses and half sentences. She sat down beside me again, hands folded in her lap. I'm not good at this, she said finally. At what? Being, whatever this is. Accountable. Present. Human, maybe. I leaned back, watching the lights shift as the timer clicked over to night mode. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be real. She looked at me, then really looked. I never said sorry. I know. I want to. I shook my head gently. Not tonight. Vanessa nodded, and this time the silence between us didn't ache. We stayed there a while longer, the greenhouse breathing around us like a quiet witness. The crickets outside had begun their chorus, and the automatic misting system let out a soft hiss as it kicked on. When she finally stood to leave, she paused by the door. Thank you, she said again. I nodded. Good night, Coach Fifth. Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes this time. Night, Director Hayes. Then she stepped out into the mist, her figure fading slowly down the gravel path like the memory of someone I had once known and maybe was learning to know again. I turned off the grow lights one by one and stood in the dim warmth of the room she had just left, unsure if what I felt was peace or just the start of something quiet and unfinished. Maybe some relationships don't close. Maybe they just soften. Maybe that's all they ever need to do. The sun was already dipping low when I unlocked the greenhouse annex for the third time that day. This time I wasn't alone. Amber Shaw, 14 years old and half hidden behind a ponytail and an oversized flannel, clutched a binder close to her chest, like it might fly away if she loosened her grip. She had been quiet the whole walk over from the main building, but I could feel the hum of anticipation in her steps. It reminded me of someone. A girl who used to walk these same gravel paths with dirt on her jeans and too many questions in her head to sleep at night. I held the door open and motioned for her to enter first. "This is the controlled field rotation model," I said. "It's been dormant since last winter's experiment. You'll have access to it for your rice trial if we can get your proposal past the safety committee." Amber's eyes widened behind her glasses. She walked carefully, not touching anything at first, just taking it all in like she was stepping into a sacred space. "This is really mine?" she asked, finally, voice small. "It's yours to learn from." "That's even better." She blinked and nodded. Then she opened her binder and pulled out a rough sketch. I leaned in. Hand-drawn rose water channels marked in blue and a small shaded margin where she had scribbled ideas about soil composition and water pH levels. "You did all this?" I stayed up last weekend watching old documentaries on sustainable rice paddies in Indonesia. Then I started mapping out what I thought might work here with what we have. But I didn't think. She stopped. "Didn't think what?" "Didn't think anyone would take it seriously. I'm just weird. Too quiet. Too much. I thought maybe I'd just write the paper and never tell anyone." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and soft at the corners. Amber tilted her head as I unfolded it. "This is a diagram I drew when I was about your age. It's of honeybee foraging routes. I thought if I could prove bees communicated with patterns in air pressure, maybe I could change how we supported pollinator systems in microfarming." Her eyes widened. "Did you?" I smiled, not even close. "But I tried. And trying led me to something else. And that led me here." Amber stared at my paper, then looked down at her own. "I used to think I had to be loud to be seen," she whispered. "You don't," I said. "You just need to be in the right room." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out what she'd need to test her rice ecosystem. She asked thoughtful questions, took notes without being prompted, and when she finally stood to go, she lingered at the door. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes. You earned this, Amber." She nodded and ran off, her binder clutched like treasure. I stood there alone for a while after she left. Watched the last rays of light hit the edge of the new greenhouse we had opened that spring. The place was bigger now. 3 full research wings, partnerships with universities in Brazil and Kenya. A rotating internship program that brought in students from all over the country. But none of that came close to what I felt watching Amber light up over a plot of dirt and the idea that her ideas mattered. People ask me sometimes what success looks like. They want numbers, growth charts, international recognition. To me, success looks like a girl with a binder full of sketches and the courage to say maybe. It looks like sticky fingers turning over compost. Like parents who used to avoid science nights now bringing snacks for the class. It looks like hope that's been given a place to root. At my desk later that night, I pulled out my own childhood notebook again. The one Grandpa saved, the one I thought I had outgrown. The pages were still intact, still messy, still wild with impossible theories and misspelled observations. I tucked Amber's diagram into the back flap. This wasn't about replacing the past anymore. It wasn't even about proving anyone wrong. It was about choosing what to grow next. And right now, in this exact season of my life, nothing mattered more than making room for the kids who hadn't yet been told they were allowed to bloom. The air backstage smelled like wood polish and nerves. I adjusted the lapel of my navy suit and glanced down at the note cards I wasn't planning to use. In my breast pocket, tucked neatly behind the folded fabric, rested Grandpa Henry's pocket watch. Its silver casing was worn soft with time, the hinge still stubborn, the photo of 10-year-old me inside, still bright despite the years. The announcer finished reading the introduction. My name echoed through the auditorium, followed by applause that felt too big and too distant to be real. I stepped onto the stage. The lights were hot. Not like greenhouse lights, warm and purposeful. These lights made you sweat, made you feel every inch of your skin. I walked slowly to the podium and looked out at a sea of strangers, educators, scientists, students, donors. All of them waiting for something. My voice didn't shake. I spoke about sustainability. About what it means when education is rooted in dignity, not pity. I shared the story of Amber and her rice field project, how her data now helps inform our cooperative methods in Georgia and Mississippi. I mentioned our international partnerships, our seed library, our youth-led soil health coalition. And then I paused. I told them about the child who started it all. Not a prodigy, not a hero. Just a kid with muddy shoes and too many questions. A girl who once tracked bees and asked why no one else was curious. A girl who sat through dinner after dinner without being asked how her day went. Who learned early that invisibility is louder than silence. I didn't say her name, because she was me. I took a breath, held the pocket watch in my hand, let the weight of it ground me. People ask what made me stay in this work. They ask why I chose kids, why I chose dirt and seeds and things that grow slow. The answer is simple. I didn't set out to save anyone. Not the world. Not the broken system. Not even my own family. I just decided to save one person. The girl who didn't get picked. The one who ate lunch in the library. The one who kept showing up even when no one clapped. That's who I saved. And in doing that, I found everything else. I closed the speech there, no final flourish. No slogan, just the truth. They stood. They clapped. Cameras flashed. But none of that stayed with me. What stayed was the quiet moment right after when I stepped off the stage and found Evelyn waiting in the wings. She was older now. Slower. But her hands were still steady as ever when she reached up and smoothed the edge of my blazer. "He would be proud," she said softly. "I know," I replied, "but I'm proud too. For once that's enough." We left the building through a side door, avoiding the press. Outside the sky was pale lavender, the first stars barely visible. I drove us back to Wisteria Creek with the windows down, the wind soft against my skin. The annex was quiet when we returned. The kids had long gone home. Vanessa's clipboard was still on the front desk, a sticky note reminding her to bring more art supplies for the weekend sessions. She had stayed. Not just in presence, but in effort. I had stopped needing an apology. In the hallway near the teaching lab, a new display case had been installed. It held small things: a dried sprig of basil from the first camp harvest, a soil sample from Kenya, a child's drawing labeled Worm Ambassador. But in the center was my old notebook. Open to the page with my earliest bee sketches. Beneath it was a plaque. It didn't say Dr. Hayes or director or founder. It said, "Only the kids who ask why ever change the world." I turned off the lights one by one and walked out onto the back porch. The magnolia tree still leaned east. The field was quiet. In the distance, I could see the edge of the greenhouse glowing softly like a lantern left out for someone to find their way home. I had not rescued the people who once left me behind, but I had rescued something sacred. Myself. And for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for someone else to call it enough. I had built something that could last longer than me. A place where the overlooked could be seen. A place where the quiet ones could lead. A place where no one had to earn their worth with pain. I didn't save my family. I saved the child they forgot. And that was everything. If this story made you feel seen, I hope you'll leave a comment, subscribe, or share it with someone else who needs to hear it. There are too many voices still waiting to be heard. Thank you for listening.